want to turn your camera off as well. I will tell you that during our last year, during one of our workshops, somebody was folding laundry. And if you watch the recording, you can actually watch her fold her laundry. I don't think she realized that she was being seen. So if you're doing something else, multitasking, it's okay to turn off your camera. But now I'd like to introduce Cecile Murphy. Cecile is the chief of the Local and Nonprofit Assistance Program, and she's going to lead us in today's workshop. Cecile?
Hey, good morning. Welcome. Thank you all for attending. We're happy to see so many folks clicking in. I'm going to start just by reiterating what Martha said about our workshops. We have one this morning on acquisition, one this afternoon on park development. And it also will cover stewardship and Jake's Law this afternoon. On November 25th and 18th, we will have Q&A sessions. Those will be drop-in, and there won't be a presentation, but you're welcome to drop in any time during the hour and ask your questions. And of course, we're always available for questions at other times as well. All right, so today we're going to do an overview of the land acquisition and the urban parks programs. We're going to highlight application requirements, tips, and updates, and answer your questions. All right, so this is a chart of our 2025 funding programs. And I will say that all the information presented today and these charts that I'll show you are all in our application package. So there's no need to screenshot or try to memorize it because it's all available on our website in the application package. See, there's 4 main programs that we offer. There's the traditional Green Acres, which is acquisition or development. There's stewardship, Jake's Law, and urban parks. And urban parks is acquisition, park development, or historic preservation. We are going to talk about traditional Green Acres acquisition today and urban parks acquisition. They are very similar. The only primary difference is eligible applicants who can apply. And I'll talk about that in a bit. Applicants can submit one application to each of the 4 programs that they're eligible for. And you can see in the eligibility notes, that column, there are different applicants are eligible for different programs. We strongly encourage, like counties, for example, can apply to all 4, which is great. But we do encourage you to, think about whether not only can you submit 4 applications, but can you manage 4 additional projects? So keep in mind capacity when applying. All right, so what can you buy? On this slide is the official definition of the kinds of projects we can fund. So it has to be for recreation and conservation purposes. Basically, you can buy land that will be used for any conservation or outdoor recreation. We only fund outdoor, not indoor. The property must have clear title, must be environmentally clean, and once you buy it, it has to be open to the public. And that's without discrimination based on residency or anything else. Some additional information about site eligibility. We encourage the purchase and remediation of contaminated sites, so brownfields, and their conversion into parks, which are greenfields. We can pay for site investigation work, but remediation is not an eligible cost. There are other programs that pay for remediation, but we cannot, unfortunately. We will, however, hold your funding as long as it takes that remediation to be completed, as long as things keep moving forward. We allow the purchase of structures, but we're pretty specific about what you do with them after you buy them. They have to be, if they're going to be kept, they have to be used in support of outdoor recreation. And some examples would be like a snack bar or a restroom building, things like that. Or they need to be demolished. And one big part of our acquisition process is review of any structures by our State Historic Preservation Office. If that office finds that it's a historic structure, it actually can't be demolished through our program. We have an updated structures policy on our website, which I encourage you to review if you are considering purchasing a property that has structures on it, and the link is in the application package. We also recommend applicants, even at the very beginning of picking the site to purchase, to look at the possible limits on future uses, particularly if you're planning active rec. So if you're buying a site because you need more soccer fields, or you want to put ball fields on it, you need to know whether that's a possibility. You need to know whether there's any permits that would put a wrench in those plans. And so we require you to reach out, at least have a conversation with the permitting agencies. Well, actually not for acquisition, but we encourage you to reach out and talk to the permitting agencies if you know you want to do active rec on a site post-acquisition. There's some things that are ineligible. We can't participate if you're purchasing a property that's been designated for future affordable housing. If a property is already preserved, that's not a good candidate either. And road right-of-ways and tidelands claims areas. There are certain types of specialty acquisitions, such as easements or cooperative projects, and we have policies of those regarding those on our website, and also the links are also in the application. All right, what will we pay for once you've decided what to buy? We'll pay for your land cost, which that CMV means certified market value. That's arrived at using the appraisals process. We'll pay for technical reports, incidental costs up to a cap, and site-specific expenses such as demo that may or may not apply to your property. So we basically cover everything necessary to acquire the property except remediation. The one thing I do recommend strongly is that you take a look at what all your possible costs might be up front, and then you can include all of them in your funding request, because sometimes people will just think about the land cost and that's all they'll put down in their funding request, and then later they think, oh well, I'd really like to get reimbursed for like half of my survey, and if the money's not there, we can't reimburse you. And all the costs are reimbursable at whatever grant percentage your project is eligible for. Speaking of which, this is a chart of all of the different grant percentages we offer for different types of projects. And this is a good first step in figuring out how much money your project might be awarded. So to figure out what grant percentage your project might get, you first figure out what category applicant you are. And there's information in the definition section in the application, and also lists in the appendices. By statute, nonprofit acquisitions are always 50%. So those are the straightforward ones. The local government's acquisitions are more complicated because we give local government applicants preferential funding for projects that benefit environmental justice communities. So I'm going to talk about that now. So if a project is located in an overburdened community subject to adverse cumulative stressors, it gets a higher grant percentage. And what that means, our nickname for those overburdened communities are ACS-OBCs. So the ACS-OBCs are census blocks. They're not entire communities. They're individual census blocks. So you can have a number of overburdened communities or in your particular community. The ACS-OBCs, the ones subject to adverse cumulative stressors, are areas that have experienced a greater than average burden of environmental and public health stressors. So these are things such as sources of air pollution, contaminated sites, solid waste facilities, scrap metal facilities, sources of water pollution, all the things that, nobody really wants in their neighborhood. So the Environmental Justice Office has a bunch of data, and they calculate all the information, and then they come up with this list of adversely stressed overburdened communities. So what we do is then we take that list and we give additional funding if a project is located in one of those census blocks. So for example, a project that would normally be eligible for only 25% grant funding, like a standard acquisition, would then be eligible for 50% grant funding if it's located within an ACS-OBC. The other thing is it could be easily accessible from an ACS-OBC. So, if something's across the street, for example, it's not in the ACS-OBC, but people from the ACS-OBC will be using that facility. There's definitions in our application form, and there's a lot of information, good information on the department's Environmental Justice Office website. So we encourage you to take a look at that. The links are also in the application. All right, so we're back to the grant percentages chart. I just thought I'd put this up here again to, so you can have another look at it. The second part of the process of figuring out how much money you're going to, your project is eligible for, is to look at that ACS OBC information. So to make it easy, we did include a list at the back of the application of all the municipalities in New Jersey that contain an ACS OBC. So just because your municipality is on the list does not mean that your project is in the ACS OBC, but it does mean that it might be. Whereas if it's not, the only chance you would have would be if it was within a quarter mile, that easily accessible from criteria. So you'd look at the list, see if your town's on there. If it is, then you can go and map the project in the EJ Map online system. So we have instructions in the back of the application in the appendices on exactly how to look up the location of your proposed project. They are pretty step-by-step. I call them, because I also am not Miss, tech guru, I call them instructions for dummies. But if it's still too overwhelming, which is perfectly fine, just reach out to your project manager, and your project manager can map it with you and let you know whether it qualifies. All right, so any project that it does not receive 100% grant funding must be matched. And this is a list of potential matching fund sources and some ineligible ones. This information, again, is all on the website. I'm sorry, not in the website. It's all in the application form. I wanted to highlight, literally and figuratively, that new this round, we have a 0% interest rate for our loans. Acquisition loans are 30-year loans, and normally for most projects or any project that was outside of an urban aid municipality, the interest rate was 2% traditionally. We have now lowered it for all projects. So regardless of where the project is located, it is eligible for a 0% loan, and that is one of the options for matching funds. Okay, so that's all good news. But unfortunately, funding percentages may not tell the whole story of how much money you might receive if your project is approved. This is particularly true for more expensive projects. We have a lot of demand for our funding, and unfortunately, it always exceeds supply. So we cap our awards. And we have traditionally had an urban parks cap, a set cap of $500,000. This year, we're going to wait until we see what the total demand is and what our total supply of funding is. So that TBD means to be determined. We will figure that out. But what that does mean is, apply for whatever you want under urban parks, and we'll see what we can fund. Green Acres has always had a cap with its funding. It's based on applicant type. And I'll show you this chart. This is also in the application package. So it depends on the type of project sponsor. This chart shows the caps from the last 3 funding rounds, with the highest numbers were having been awarded in our most recent round. It's unlikely that our awards will be significantly different from this range, so you can use these figures for planning purposes. The only exception is the nonprofits. Our nonprofit funding has been a little different in recent years. We've had a little more than usual. So we've decided, instead of having set caps for nonprofits, right now we're doing awards based on demonstrated need, past performance, and overall demand. Okay, urban parks. So I wanted to highlight a lot of or some differences in our urban parks projects. The main difference, as I mentioned earlier, is eligible applicants. All local governments are eligible to apply. Actually, I'm sorry, not all counties are eligible to apply, and certain municipalities. You have to, it has to be an urban aid municipality. So you can be a local government that is an urban aid municipality or a county there. The projects, however, must be located in or easily accessible from an overburdened community subject to adverse cumulative stressors. So I talked about that earlier. And again, within an urban aid municipality. So it's like a subcategory of urban aid projects. So municipality in an overburdened community subject to adverse cumulative stressors. And some of these urban aid municipalities, every census block is an ACS OBC. And I think there's at least one urban aid where it's just one. So the location of the project is extremely important for eligibility for this particular program. It is 100% grant funding. There is no match required for urban parks. And the list of the eligible municipalities is in our application. So those are municipalities that are urban aid that have at least one ACS OBC in them. But again, I know I sound like a broken record, but the project itself has to be in one of those ACS OBCs or easily accessible from. And the reason, the purpose of this funding is just to focus on our hardest hit areas, the parts of our state that, really need the most help and could really benefit the most from some open space. The urban parks applications can also be rolled over into the Green Acres round. You can request that if your project, you can request that if your project is unsuccessful in the urban parks round, it doesn't get any funding, or if it's underfunded, like it gets some money through urban parks, but not enough, then we would automatically roll it over into would basically result in you being able to submit the same project to urban parks and Green Acres at the same time. I will say that if you do roll the project over, then it would count as your one Green Acres, traditional Green Acres request, that first line in the chart of the different programs. The application lists the extra requirements for rollover requests. Basically, you have to check a box on the application form. You have to add a paragraph to your enabling resolution and discuss it in your public hearing. And you have to submit a recreation and open space inventory. As a reminder, as with all of our other programs and projects, meaningful public access must be provided to all urban parks project sites. No questions so far?
Yes, there is one. Someone asked
Okay.
back from the historic structure. They said if the State Historic Preservation Office finds a structure to be historic, what is the responsibility of the purchaser to maintain the structure? And will the area of the building be excluded from the purchase? And basically that, unfortunately, I have to say it's a case by case basis, because excluding it might sound fine, but if you're going to buy the whole thing and just not use Green Acres funding for the structure because we know you're going to demolish an historic structure that SHPO doesn't want you to, we might have an issue there. So we could talk about it. If you're going to cut it out and not buy it, then obviously that's not part of the project at all. And in terms of maintaining the structure itself, the historic structure, that's going to depend on the condition of the of the structure itself. I mean, we're not going to, if it's, some of these buildings are already, deteriorated and maybe even beyond saving. But that's something that we would talk about, because we're not going to be unrealistic about, there are no unrealistic expectations about you restoring it if that's not your mission. So those kinds of things we would want to talk to you about, which is why I think Cecile mentioned earlier, or we'll mention again, talk to us before you have as soon as you get an idea of a project, give us a call just to talk it through. Okay. Go ahead.
Thanks, Martha. Okay, so now that we've covered eligibility and funding, I'm going to highlight some of our application requirements and tips to help you submit a successful application. The first of these is our requirement for public engagement. We, in recent years, have really started to focus on meaningful public engagement for a number of reasons. It, not the least of which is because it helps make sure that taxpayers have input on how their tax dollars are spent, which is always nice. We have found, however, that it also helps our applicants. It helps you design better projects. particularly on the park development side, but also in the acquisition in terms of selecting what to purchase. And those acquisitions, those priorities are ones that match the needs and priorities of the community if you have engaged them and gotten their input. Also, we have found that if you don't engage the public early on in the process, sometimes they don't know about the project. We fund the project, you start to move forward, and then there's controversy. So it's better if the public is aware and engaged and actively giving input to your project, because it'll be better and less chance that it will end up being canceled because of public opposition, which has happened a few times. And so in doing this, you have to involve the public in the project planning process. So we're not figuring everything out and then asking the public what they think. We're saying, what do you think? And then figuring it out. We have gotten a little more detailed in our requirements as we have kind of been finding our way through public engagement and how to make it meaningful. And this year we have 3 categories of types of engagement, and we're asking our applicants to pick 2 out of the 3 categories to focus on. So one of them is community surveys, then there's community meetings, and invitations for community input. And I'll talk a little bit about each one. So for surveys, this is a very popular one. They can be online or they can be paper surveys. It's great if they're available through the website and you can click on them through an ad in social media. Like, that's a really nice way to reach out to a lot of people and make it easy for them to respond. But, you can have, depending on your community, if they're not really tech savvy, that might not be a great option. So we've had applicants do paper surveys and go ahead and put them in public buildings, public events. So the library, the municipal building, the rec center, senior citizen center, school functions, street fairs, anything, anytime that a place or event where a lot of people gather is a good way to get a lot of respondents. The surveys must include open-ended questions, so it can't just be, here's our plan, do you like it? Because we actually got one of those last time. They must be conducted early. Again, this is not something you do right before submitting the application. This is the first thing that happens, is the public engagement. They have to be well advertised so people know, and it has to include the results in the application. So, as with the other public engagement, you cannot guarantee that people will respond, and we will notice if you did your best and you tried and still nobody did, or, very small numbers. So we're asking you to make the effort. We're not asking you to guarantee that you got a lot of feedback. We're just asking you to try really hard to get it. And if you can't, then that means your community is not that engaged, and maybe a time in the future will be more successful. But we wouldn't hold that against you. Community meetings.
Cecile, we have a couple questions before we get too
Sure.
far. Are community engagement meetings required for the planning incentive grant in addition to the public hearing?
No, the planning incentive grants have gone through a public process through creating and submitting an OSRP, an open space and recreation plan. And that is primarily when the public does get to have a say and help guide the policy on open space. If you have an existing OSRP, we are going to start to ask that you check in with the public after about 5 years on progress so far and where you're headed, and taking comments. So, we think community involvement and community feedback is very important, but that's one of the benefits of the planning incentive program, is that you've done that planning. You've involved the community in the overall plan. And that's why you don't have to do it each time you submit a parcel, for example, or a supplemental funding request.
That's good, because that's one of the questions here. So the next one was, can you explain the difference between the surveys and request for input?
Yes, I'm getting there.
Oh, okay. Then let me jump to the next one.
Yeah.
Let me just do the next one because I think it's quick. Is public engagement required for a supplemental application by a nonprofit?
No, supplemental funding requests do not require public engagement. I mean,
Okay.
you're welcome to engage the public anytime you want. We're all for it, but that is not a requirement. Okay, so community meetings, they can be online or virtual. They can be on site or elsewhere, you know, in the municipal building or in the nonprofit's headquarters. Again, we do ask that they're well advertised, and that you let us know, you know, basically you can take minutes or somehow let us know what the feedback was at the meeting. So an open house at the park is also an option, focus groups. All right, and then inviting community input. This can be just giving additional opportunities for feedback. So having a table at a park where you just ask people, you know, it's not that different from a survey. I can understand why you would be asking what is the difference between a survey and input, but it could just be so as simple as, you know, handing out a map of the town and saying circle where you would like to have a park. You know, it doesn't have to be a survey per se, but any kind of ability, you know, giving the public the ability to give you feedback, having having like an input form on your website where, you know, here, tell us your suggestions about parks in your town, or in our town. Or if you're a nonprofit, tell us suggestions about where you think we should be focusing, buying land, things like that. Mailers to households, inviting input, social media posts, all of those things that just are saying, we want to hear from you. I mean, a survey definitely says that it's a little more organized and structured, but you know, just asking for feedback in a non-structured way, but just giving them opportunities to tell you what they think is, you know, slightly different and also important. Okay, so we're asking for broad input from the community. So as much as we appreciate and love the Open Space Committee, they can't be the only people you talk to. It has to be, you know, a broader input, engaging the general public. And the idea again is that we're not just saying these are our plans. We're asking input when we make plans. So with that in mind, we have a question in our application about how the results of the planning engagement process were incorporated into the project design and decision making. And that's where you would tell us, you know, how you went about it and how, you know, whether it changed your mind or in some cases it's just going to, you know, give you affirmation that yes, what you're thinking would be a good idea is what the community wants. So that's what we want to hear from you. Okay. All right. I know this is large and I didn't mean it to be obnoxious, but it does look a little bit like that. Basically, we've had a lot of confusion in the past 2 rounds since we've introduced public engagement. I just want to be so crystal clear that the public hearing is not the same as public engagement. I particularly want to stress this because this round, applications that do not demonstrate meaningful public engagement will not be funded. So this is a very important distinction, and I just want to, you know, I gave it its own slide so everybody would completely understand that. All right, speaking of the public hearing, Martha, were there questions? No,
Nope.
okay. Speaking of the public hearing, we've also had lots of questions through the years about our public hearing requirements. So last round, we ended up with a checklist. We added a checklist this round for nonprofits, just so that again, there's no confusion, there's no second guessing what we're asking for and what we're not asking for. This slide shows the requirements for the public notice. They're also in the application, so I'm not going to go through them one by one. But if you have any questions about these, we can talk about it at the end, or you could reach out to your project manager. These are the requirements for the hearing itself and the submission of the meeting minutes. So again, they're in the application. I'm not going to discuss all of them, but I did want to highlight a few. The one thing that we're stressing this year is that at the public hearing, the applicant must discuss the criteria that led to or the reasons for pursuing the particular acquisition at the hearing. So that can definitely involve a discussion of the public engagement process It can talk about, you know, if you're like what criteria you used to pick this property. And we understand that there is a balance between transparency and your bargaining power with the landowner. So you don't need to go into gruesome detail about how much you want this property so bad. Because then obviously your bargaining power goes down a bit. But you know, but we do feel that it is important to be transparent to the point where the public understands why you're doing this. So a brief discussion will take care of that. And for those of you who are local governments in particular that hold your public meetings at like 5, you know, we have had some complaints about our 6 o'clock requirement. So that basically the public hearings have to be held in the evening, 6 p.m. or later. And what we say is that it's fine if the meeting starts earlier, as long as the hearing starts at 6 or later. And when you do the notice for the public hearing, it's very clear when that hearing will start, so that folks who get home from work late, if they want to tune in, if it's virtual, or if they want to show up, if it's in person, they know that they can still make it to the municipal building to see, you know, to participate in the hearing. Transcripts are fine instead of minutes, but no video or audio submissions, please. We get a lot of applications. We just don't have time to sift through those. And as I mentioned earlier, if you're doing an urban parks project and you're requesting a rollover into the Green Acres round, that needs to be noted in the resolution. It also has to be discussed in the public hearing and should be noted in the minutes that it was discussed in the public hearing. A lot of the things we ask you to do, if it's in the minutes, then we know you did it. So that's very helpful to us when we're reviewing applications. There's no need for us to go back and give you an email or call and say, did you do this? Because you checked it, but it wasn't in the minutes. And, you know, so if you put it in the minutes, that's very easy for us to just do our own check. All right, our enabling resolution requirement. Yes.
I was just going to say, did you want to talk a little bit about how, I know we get a lot of questions, not today, but about nonprofits holding public hearings and nonprofits and who's the public for nonprofits, like their membership versus everybody else. So do you want to?
Okay, yeah, the nonprofits are not required to hold a public hearing. They nonprofits just have to do a public notice that shows up in the newspaper and on their website, and there's a requirement to notify the town in a letter saying, you know, we're applying for this property, we're applying to preserve this property. It's always nice when there's a letter of support from the town with those applications, but it is not a requirement. The requirement is just the notification. In terms of nonprofits and public engagement, that's, you know, that's the part that happens at the beginning of the process. There, you know, for us, I think what we consider public engagement would involve your members, because just as municipalities and counties are beholden to their residents, nonprofits are beholden to your members. So, you know, outreach to your members. If you have good ties in the community, we definitely suggest reaching out to the community as well. But if you, for example, are a national nonprofit or a statewide nonprofit, you know, you don't necessarily have ties in each and every community. So your membership would be fine if community engagement is more difficult. Do you have anything to add, Martha, to that?
No.
Okay.
Fine, thank you. We did have somebody asking, someone asked, will you be providing a copy of the presentation? And this is being recorded and this will be posted hopefully tomorrow or certainly this week. Also the charts and things, if that's what you're concerned about, the charts and things are in the applications themselves. We can see whether or not we can post just the presentation itself. But again, most of the information comes from Cecile's comments on it. So it might not be as useful, but maybe we can see if we can post this too. Thanks.
Okay. All right. So the enabling resolution required for everybody. We have a template and we really don't want any changes to it. Our attorneys are very happy with it. And we apologize if your attorneys are not, but we really, it just holds everything up if there are changes to the enabling resolution. So unless somebody feels like something's illegal, just please try to convince them, all your legal minds, that it's a good idea just to go with it as is. The amounts in the resolution need to match the amounts requested in the application form. We've had some issues with that. I will say that if they don't, if there's a discrepancy, then we use the amounts in the resolution, because that's the amount that was approved by the governing body. Matching figures need to be included. If it's a 100% grant project, just put a 0. If there is a loan, if there's no loan request, put a 0 for the loan amount. I mean, this is piddly stuff, but it does, again, help us review quickly, which is, I think, all of our goals. I'm going to go over this one in a little bit of detail. The match figure in the resolution equals the total project cost that you told us. So that's the land cost plus all those other things minus your funding request. So if this is let's just say it's a $5 million application, and your funding request should be in line with what our, I mean, all right, it doesn't have to be in line, but if you put the funding request, you need to be able to make up the difference between what you said the project is going to cost and the funding request. Either you do that by just saying, okay, well, we want $2 million out of that 5, and then you put, 3 as your match, or you put whatever your grant percentage is. So if it's a 5 million and it's 50% grant, you could put 2.5. Whatever you do, the resolution has to reflect that you will cover the rest of the cost, whether that's just the match or whether it's more than the match. And that probably sounded really confusing, so please reach out. We have a number of project managers. What they want to do is go over all your information with you before you apply. Doing it before you apply makes the application process much smoother, and it makes sure that the resolution is correct, which is what we need in order to fund the project. So again, for the urban parks, there's that additional paragraph that is required if you're doing a rollover. But the biggest takeaway from this slide is just reach out to us about the resolution if you're confused in any way. We routinely review people's draft enabling resolutions. There's, we have no problem with that. We'd rather, sometimes I would review 3 or 4 from the same applicant each time they made a change, which is fine. We just want to make sure it gets done right. All right, ranking. It's a competitive program. We love it when we can fund all of our eligible projects, but unfortunately, demand often exceeds funding, and the way we handle that is through ranking. We have some projects that do or do not get funded based on as little as 1 point. So we really want you to be successful. And so our application outlines our priorities. It outlines what we are looking for, what's important to us as a department, as the state, and as our program. They're listed here. They're discussed in detail in the application package. And we recognize that not every project is going to do all of these things. That would be pretty fabulous, but we are, there are limits to what one piece of property can do. But the more of those priorities a project hits on, the higher their ranking will be. And there's more information on all of this in the application, and a very detailed list of, what we look for and what points everything gets. So, and again, any questions, just reach out. In order to be ranked and compete for funding, an application must be eligible. That's our first hurdle. The application package has a list of every circumstance that will lead to an application being disqualified. We've talked about a few already, public engagement, the public hearing, things like that. And we've highlighted a few more based on problems we see a lot. Signatures are very important. Is it the right person that's named in the resolution? Did that person and the CFO both sign? Things like that. The public hearing and public engagement, extremely important. Again, we want you to be successful. We don't want to disqualify any of our applications. So if you're unclear or unsure, reach out. I know I'm kind of a broken record on that topic, but really we have some of the best staff. Our project managers are friendly. They're, public servants, and they want to help. Okay, just a few notes about supplemental funding requests. A lot of you have projects, I imagine, that you would like additional funding for. So we accept supplemental funding requests for acquisition projects, park development projects, and stewardship projects. So there are 2 different supplemental funding request forms. Please pick the right one. Pick the one that's for acquisitions if that's what you're asking the supplemental funding for. There are a number of attachments that are required that are listed here. They also can have different forms, the enabling resolution, the nonprofit eligibility certification. There are different versions if it's a supplemental funding request as opposed to a new application. The good news is if you get the right form, it has the attachments to the correct versions of the attachment forms. So you don't have to worry unless, if you get the right form, you're all good. Whoops, sorry. Okay, we do require now that each supplemental funding request, just like each new application, must be submitted through the portal on our website. We used to take them by email. We don't anymore. They have to go through the website. That said, a lot of our project managers are happy to work with you on a draft of your supplemental funding request, and you can email them directly that draft and have that dialogue with them on how to fill it out correctly. Then when the final is ready, that's what gets submitted through the portal. There is a new requirement this year, and this is for planning incentive projects. New this year, the OSRP, the Open Space Recreation Plan, must be valid through July 31st, 2025 in order to be eligible for supplemental funding. If it's going to expire before then we are going to require that the applicant submit a draft of the update by the application deadline. So either your OSRP is good past July 31st, like it expires in 2026 or something, or if it expires between now and then, or it already is expired, you need to have submitted a draft by February 5th. So that's new. I slowed down when I talked about it because it's important and we don't want anybody getting surprised at the end. Don't know if there's any questions on that or anything else. Martha?
No more questions yet so far. We will have an open question time at the end.
Okay, all right. As a note about supplemental funding, urban parks projects are not eligible for supplemental funding, but you can reach out to your Green Acres contact to discuss requesting additional funding through Green Acres for those projects. All right, application submission. So applicants must submit complete applications or supplemental funding requests by the deadline. And that, as I said, is February 5th at midnight. Some of the application materials were confusing. Some said 5 p.m., some said midnight. It's midnight. Yeah, as long as it's in before the next day, it's all good. And in terms of completeness, there's a submissions checklist for the application package. And if it doesn't specifically say something is not applicable or optional, that it may not be applicable or optional, it must be submitted in order to be complete. All application materials have to be submitted by this date. You can't sort of send in bits and pieces later. It all has to be there or else it's not eligible. And that includes the public hearing minutes. So what we say in the application in the getting started section is, first of all, get going on your public engagement if you haven't already. The second matter of business, schedule that public hearing if you're a local government. Figure out what governing body meeting you're going to be having it at, and then work backwards. Work backwards to when you have to advertise it, when it has to be in the newspaper, and then when the concept plan, when the project reference map has to be done, use that as a way to work backwards to get everything done. Because we do understand that it's, there are quite a few submissions, and it does take some planning to get them all done at the right time. And we're happy to help with that as well. If you wanted to, say, look, this is our schedule, or this is idea for how we're going to get the application done in time, we'd be happy to take a look at that as well. The goal of having all this information due and that having it due at this specific day, no exceptions, everything due, is that it gives us the opportunity to review the applications quicker and then get the money approved quicker, which I think is something we all share as our goal. Okay, so this is a screenshot of our website and this is how to submit through the portal. So you go to our website and then go to Forms and Regulations, that tab at the top that's white. I mean, it's white because it was clicked on, but and then you'll see there's that line of green, and it says right under it in white here, it says Application Submissions. So you click on that, and then down here it says Upload Application Forms Here. So you'll click here, and then up will come a form, and it has drop-down menus and fill-ins, and so you just fill out the information. It's not long. It's maybe 6 things you got to fill in. You upload the files, and you press Submit. And the good news is we did revamp it a bit to make it a little easier to follow, and it was posted today. So our new and improved portal is up and running. Not that we expect anyone to be submitting anything, next week or something, but it is ready when you are. Okay.
We do have a couple of questions. See if I could.
Yes.
Cecile, a couple of questions. I don't want to make them wait too long. Please explain the OSRP expiration date. Is that determined by Green Acres?
Yes. Yeah, everything having to do with the OSRP is determined by Green Acres because we're the ones who invented the OSRP. I mean, not as a concept, but for our use in the planning incentive projects. And was that the question? What was the first part?
Please explain the expiration date. So basically it's good for 10 years.
Yes, sorry. Yes. Yeah, it's good for 10 years from the date on the plan. And if you're not sure whether yours is still good, reach out to your project manager again. Sorry, Martha, go ahead.
Is there a 2025 copy of the planning incentive application form and packet available on the website?
Not yet. And that is a very good question. We've updated all of the other applications, but the PI application is scheduled to be updated next week. We haven't had a lot of new PI applications, but that's kind of exciting that you're asking because maybe we'll have one. So yes, I would look after, maybe at like the end of next week, I would look for it and it should be there. Because yeah, right now there's an old copy up there. Or actually, no, there's none. There's none. We took it down. So yeah, look at the end of next week and it should be there. Any other one?
Go ahead. Nope, go
okay,
ahead.
So I have covered so much information in this presentation. And, all
right, you guys leave.
I just want to say again that the application materials cover all of these topics in detail. I did not make any of this up. It's all in the application package. So, please do review those. You're also welcome, as I said, to attend our upcoming Q&A sessions on November 25th and December 18th. And at any time, you are welcome to reach out to your project manager. So you can figure out who that is by going to our website, clicking on Contact Us on the banner. And then if you click on local nonprofit, is it local? Well, anyway, it comes up with these 2 columns. The first column here is for acquisition projects. The second column is for park development, stewardship, Jake's Law. So if you're interested in acquisition, which you are because you're here, it's this first column, and make sure you got the right column, just because a lot of counties have different project managers for acquisition and park development projects. But yeah, we're always here. We're friendly. We want to hear from you. There's no stupid questions. Just reach out anytime. We also wanted to take the opportunity to plug our new listserv. Yay! At the bottom of our homepage, you can enter your email address and sign up to receive updates and alerts from Green Acres. This is not application related. I mean, application related, announcements and things like that will definitely go out to the listserv, but this is for anything. This is just, if you want to get contacted by Green Acres whenever we have news, please sign up. All right, that was it. Thank you for coming, and I guess we can do questions if there's any more questions.
No, but Kimberly Testa posted the link in the chat to the contact list on the website to make it easier for everyone. Thank you, Kim. But now, if you'd like, you can just raise your hand, and we'll just handle questions and answers. We have another half hour, so please feel free to ask your question. Just raise your hand and we'll call on you. What is the status? Oh, this is a good one. What is the status of the Green Acres regulation revisions? We took time out of that. Yes, we took time out of that to do this. We are working full time on the rule revisions. We are still actually receiving comments from people, even though we've been asking for the last couple of years. But if you have any comments, you can still send them to us now. But we're hoping in the next few weeks to have there's an approval chain, a review chain that has to happen, process that has to happen. So we're hoping to have them done in the next few weeks or month or so, to go to our attorneys and start looking at things. So this would be the last sort of time for you to submit comments until they're proposed. Once the rules are proposed, then there'll be a comment period for the public to submit comments on what we are proposing. We're bringing the rules. These rules talk about the local and nonprofit funding, and we're bringing things into up to speed with what legislation that has passed. I mean, the rules were last adopted in 2005, so a lot has changed since then. So we're trying to bring them into the current day and how we're doing things. We're also introducing new funding categories and some other good news, and so we're excited about it. But it's a behemoth. The process is so big. So it is taking a little longer than we thought. They don't expire until the end of next year, December of 2025. And so that our goal is to have them proposed early in the new year, give public comment period, and then work towards adoption. So thank you for asking. Any other questions? Floor is open. Feel all the information is settling into everyone's brain crevices. We cannot stress enough how much we want you to reach out to us with questions, because the whole mission of our program is to create more preserve more open space, build parks, to make New Jersey better. So we want to approve your project. So we want your application to be successful. So we want to guide you as much as we can. So please, from here forward, anytime, give us an email. The applications themselves say that you can send inquiries to Green Acres applications at dep.nj.gov. There's also a Green Acres at dep.nj.gov email. Those are two emails. You can submit them if you don't know who to ask for. Submit your questions through those two addresses. Again, they're in the applications and on our data and on our website. We'll be happy to then funnel your question to the right person. Well, I think we'll probably just end up staying on for a while, because we did say it was till 11:30, but normally with our Q&As, they're more like an open house, so we do definitely stay the whole time. I'm not sure that we're going to necessarily stare at each other for the next half hour, but we're definitely hanging around, so feel free to go if you want to go. Yes.
There's no need to hang on.
Yeah, we'll if there are no questions for a little while, we'll just end the meeting. So thank you for coming, and again, please reach out. You're welcome, Rick. if we are considering a site for acquisition, can it be accomplished under a planning incentive grant initially? If you're a municipality that has an open space tax and an open space plan, and you want to apply to us as a planning incentive, then absolutely you would be able to buy that property through that. I'm not sure what you mean by initially. Brenda, if you wanted to unmute and specify.
Thank you. We're not very far along in the process, and we haven't done a Green Acres application in a while. So I know there are a lot of steps with acquisition, but we were wondering if we could start with a planning incentive grant by identifying the tract and a value based on an appraisal, and then if funding is approved, follow through with all the steps needed for an acquisition.
If I understand, you can let us know, you can talk to us about whether that parcel would be eligible or not, but we wouldn't be approving it unless we're talking about an at-risk. So do you have an open space tax?
Yes, we do.
Okay,
And we
but
have
no-
we have a current plan.
Oh, you do? So I think I missed the question though. Are you just wondering whether that parcel can be considered, whether or not it's eligible or not before you apply?
Yeah, maybe I'm not phrasing it right. The parcel is not uniquely identified in the plan.
That's okay. We don't require plans to identify parcels. It's more project areas and your priorities and goals. And so a particular, if you said you want to buy land, preserve greenways along streams, and this parcel meets that goal, then that's fine. You don't have to list blocks and lots in your plan. Most do not, for the reasons Cecile mentioned earlier, that it can actually impact how well you can negotiate if the landowner knows that they own the key parcel to your project. So you don't have to list it that way. It should be consistent with the goals that you put into your plan.
It is, and that's why we were wondering if we could do the planning incentive grant. I haven't been able to look at the criteria for the 2024 planning incentive. Is there some way that could be provided until the 2025 guidance is available? Because I'm really not sure whether we're supposed to do the planning incentive or the full out acquisition application.
If you have a tax and a plan, it's best to do the planning incentive. It's just a shorter application because really the work was done when you did the plan.
Okay.
There's some things you wouldn't need to do that you would need to if you submitted a site-specific, a standard acquisition project.
Okay.
The only difference would be, I guess, I guess it still wouldn't matter because we have some planning incentives that are also urban aid. So you'd still do the planning incentive application and you'd get the better urban aid money. But no, if planning incentive, we make it easier for you as an incentive. You don't have to keep reapplying and submitting the long application. But yeah, we could send you, if you want to send us an email, we can send you the old planning incentive application just to give you an idea, because it hasn't changed drastically. It'll give you an idea of what we'll be looking for.
That would be fantastic. Can I just put my email in the chat?
You can, sure.
Okay.
And also you'd want to look at the open space and recreation plan guidelines to make sure that your plan, you did it on your own without our guidance, that it also complies. You'd want to look at
Oh,
that
yes.
too.
I'm sorry. You did approve the plan in 2018, so I know it's still a valid plan.
Oh, great.
Oh, great. Then you absolutely should. Matter of fact, did you ever have an open planning incentive with us?
We did, but I believe it's been closed.
Okay, but then this would actually be a supplemental funding request, most likely. But you should
I
talk
think-
to.
I think I better get in touch with our person.
Yes, no, I think it just got even easier for you because we close planning incentives, but then we reopen them once you have a new parcel. We just don't leave them open forever just because it ends up on our project manager's list and it counts towards them. So we would just reopen yours. So it's probably a supplemental funding request. So please, yes, reach out to your person and we can go from there.
Thank you very much. Kathy, I see that you're on the call. I'm from Lawrence Township. I will be reaching out to you. Thank you.
And she just put a thing in the chat saying, "Hi, Brenda, I'm here."
Yes, okay,
Thanks, everyone.
sure.
Oh, that's great. Martha, it says, Dan Pace said, I see from the contact link that our Phobos and Pennington's rep has changed. Do we continue working with the rep with whom we started an application? Now these are planning incentives, yes. So you would, I'm guessing you had
Actually,
Carrie.
Liz-
Carrie was
no, Liz-
your rep,
Liz-
and then now Liz is.
Yeah, Liz responded saying that she
Oh,
would be the
good.
contact. So Liz,
Oh,
Liz
great.
Wynn is,
I just needed to read more.
yes, Liz Wynn is your project manager.
Okay, great. Wonderful.
And then someone else had asked the question about the recording, or how they would receive the recording. It won't be, we're not sending it out, but we're posting it on our website this week. So one of the things that we didn't really mention, and you'd already know if you were in the situation, is that we did a couple of months ago send letters out to local governments and nonprofits who that have too many open projects or a serious compliance problem. Still, you didn't mention that, right?
I did not.
Okay,
know.
so we called them the capacity and compliance list. I should have mentioned this earlier, but again, this isn't a surprise to anybody. If you're a municipality or a nonprofit that has 3 or more open projects, we'd like you to close at least, we get below 3 before you apply for more. Again, we're thinking of you and ourselves and how many projects can you actually get done within the 2-year project period that we give you if we approve funding. Counties have a limit of 5, so they have a little bit more because generally they have larger staffs and larger capacity. But also, if you have a serious compliance problem and you've been working on that or not working on it, we needed you to make significant progress, or you couldn't get any funding at all, not even supplemental funding. The capacity people, you could ask for supplemental funding for an existing project. We just wouldn't approve a new one. But if you have a compliance problem, we won't approve any funding for you next round. But you have time to resolve all those things. So if it's a capacity issue, talk to your project manager. If it's a compliance issue, talk to the compliance officer from our sister agency in public land compliance. Again, you know who you are because these letters already went out. But I just want to explain that that's why we do this, because we don't want you to bite off more than you can chew. Same thing with limiting numbers of parcels that you could be working on at the same time in a planning incentive or other acquisition. We don't want to be reviewing, spending time reviewing appraisals and things like that. We want you to buy a parcel and then move on to the next one. It doesn't have to be finished, but we can't just keep doing appraisals, for example, while you sort of shop around and fish for projects, for parcels. It just takes too much staff time. So just prioritize and we'll work with you on this. Okay. It's hard to tell whether the folks who are still on are watching or maybe have moved away. We did have that one other time where somebody left their camera on and stayed in the meeting for a long time. So we'll just give it another minute and then we'll just end the meeting. And we really appreciate everyone coming. Okay, we're going to stop the recording. Amy, I guess, can you stop it? I think you have to be the one that stops it.